welcome to Arthritis Answers. I am Kendall Horvatich, Development Manager for the Arthritis Foundation Heartland Region.
And I'm Casey Stein, Director of Special Events for the Heartland Region.
We want to thank our sponsors, Logan Street Signs and Banners and the Wofford Theater. Recently on social media, we've noticed a lot of people coming out and telling their story about how arthritis is an invisible disease. And so we wanted to spend some time today talking about how people don't look sick.
Absolutely. For example, in the picture now on the screen, you'll see several of people we know here in Indiana who have arthritis. They don't look sick. Many of them just look like friends, family, and neighbors. But each of them, like I said earlier, from Indiana has arthritis or an arthritis-related disease.
One of these ladies actually recently on social media shared a story about how she was discriminated in Hamilton County. She had just had her second knee surgery, and she had trouble getting out of bed. It took her hours to get ready. When she got to the grocery store, she parked in a handicapped spot, and a guy from across the parking lot screamed, "Hey lady, you're not handicapped. You need to move your car." Little did he know that she just wanted to stay home in bed that day. She could barely move. She just needed some sympathy, and because she didn't look sick, she was being discriminated against.
Luckily, she is strong and shared this on social media. I think that's a really hard thing to do, to talk about something like that. But something that inspired her to come out and share her experience was an episode she had just recently seen on Dr. Phil, where another woman with rheumatoid arthritis shared a very similar experience. And I'm actually going to read a little excerpt from the episode for you. So Dr. Phil had the medical officer from Pfizer, I think I said that right, and then Pam, the woman with arthritis. So Pam starts the episode describing her experience. She says, "This is not your grandma's bad knee. This is so much more than just arthritis. This is a disease that people can't see. So if I park in a disabled parking space, I have people yell, 'Hey miss, you can't park there.' And I just want to explain, if only you could walk in my body for 10 minutes. It affects my lungs, my kidneys, my joints. It prevents me from being the mom my kids want and deserve. I can't make plans to go to the ballpark or on vacation." Dr. Phil later in the episode describes, "I don't know why people struggle with this so much. If you have a disease, I don't care what it is, and certainly with arthritis, it is important to not put up a front, but to be real with your family and friends so that they can educate themselves about it. They need to understand there are psychological components to this. Any kind of condition can be frustrating and begin to wear down your attitude." Pam agrees and says, "It affects me socially, with family and friends. I find myself lying to everybody that I'm fine, but I'm not, and hiding behind a smile." Dr. Phil continues, "It starts to make you lonely. Then you feel depressed and isolated, and it continues to snowball. And attitude is so important to complying with treatment and regimen." And it's absolutely true. You can take all the medicines in the world to help with pain, but if you feel targeted and isolated, like he says, it doesn't help, and it can make you feel worse.
Yeah, and Fox 59 recently shared a story from Fox 17 West Michigan about a lady in England, actually. She had posted a note on her car, or she had a note posted on her car, and she wanted to share it on social media to educate people about people having an invisible disease. She went to her local supermarket and she parked in a handicapped spot. She has fibromyalgia after a serious fall several years ago. And this is the note she came back to find on her car. It says, "Being fat and ugly doesn't mean you're disabled. Park somewhere else."
That's terrible.
It's horrible. She, like I said, has fibromyalgia, and she shared this on social media because she wanted to educate people. She wanted to find the person who posted this note and explain to him that just because she doesn't look sick, she still is sick. And she considers herself a strong person, she says in the article, but she knows that others might not be as strong, and this note could be damaging to them. And so I can't even imagine if I found something like that on my car and I was having a rough day with arthritis or fibromyalgia.
Yeah, it's devastating. Like she says, to kind of pull yourself out of bed and then think you're going to have a good day and to be faced with this. And don't get us wrong, more than just incidents in parking lots with handicapped spaces occur. There's a lot of targeting and confusion, and not just in adults either, with kids. I know a lot of younger kids struggle who have arthritis because it is an invisible disease and because it is a disease that can transform throughout the day. One of our JA moms was sharing that her child, has to start the day with a warm bath to loosen the joints and then hobbles out the door and has all these special things they need to change, but by the afternoon they look like a normal kid. And so sometimes classmates and peers, especially when you're younger, might think that they're faking it, or sometimes maybe they have to sit out during gym during the 1 mile run, but then they're fine to go to recess. And it really is up to the patient to kind of determine what they're comfortable with, but a lot of times that can be perceived as faking it. And I know you have another story too of a kid with JA.
Just last night, one of our walk-on-Re's mom posted on Facebook that she had just signed Carson up for soccer for the first time. He's 3.5 years old. He's had arthritis since he was 18 months, maybe earlier. That's when they diagnosed him. And the mom was trying to explain to the soccer coach Carson's limitations, that he has good days and bad days. And the coach said, "Are you sure he's sick? He looks normal to me." And it just hit her because she's like, you don't know what we go through. She has to give him shots, and he calls her mean mommy every time she has to give him shots. They have numerous doctor's appointments. Some days he just can't get out of bed. And for him to say, "Are you sure he's sick?" just was heartbreaking for her.
It just goes to show there's still a lot of ignorance about this disease and other invisible diseases, not just arthritis, not just fibromyalgia, but, people who struggle with diabetes or cancer. There's a lot of confusion and ignorance, and he might have had good intentions saying, he looks normal, but it's really something that we're struggling to raise awareness about, and that's kind of taking a step back by saying things like that.
Yeah, and Casey found this awesome graphic that we're going to share on our social media accounts during the commercial break. It says, "Not all disabilities look like this. Some disabilities look like this." So we just want to educate people that you don't have to be in a wheelchair to be considered disabled or have rough days, and spread awareness. Yeah. So please share this on social media. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Casey is going to interview Amber Wolf with our AgriBility program and talk about arthritis in agriculture.
Thank you.
When Margaret and I decided to sell the old estate here, we had only one choice in signage: Logan Street signs and banners. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore, but rather located on 10th Street on the south side of Noblesville. Well, we sold the old beauty, and we were able to buy this wonderful estate. And we had so much money left over, I was able to buy this beautiful 1968 Eldorado Cadillac for Margaret. Only 472,000 miles. Margaret loves it because it's got those big seats and that heavy-duty suspension to support her svelte frame. Next time you're looking for signs or banners, call old Jim at Logan Street Signs and Banners, 773-7200. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore.
Everyone knows it's easy to find first-run movies in the big theaters. But where can you go to watch your favorite classic movies on the big screen for the perfect night out? Why rent a flick when you can rent the entire theater? Call today to reserve our 32-seat theater for your next event, or just stop by to see what's showing this weekend. The 14 by 7 foot screen and the high quality digital surround sound system offers all the amenities you would expect from the big theaters, with a laid back atmosphere and comfortable seating of your own home. Wofford Theater at 1744 South 10th Street in Noblesville gives you the classic movies you want with a big theater experience.
Welcome back. I'm Casey Stein with the Arthritis Foundation. Today we have Amber Wolf, Agribility Project Coordinator for the Arthritis Foundation. Welcome, Amber. Even though the weather might not be acting appropriately, the late spring and early summer season is when the gardens start to come out in central Indiana. Gardening is the #1 hobby in the United States, but many individuals with arthritis pain may feel they need to discontinue their outdoor activities due to arthritis difficulties. However, Amber thinks differently. Like I said, my guest today is Amber Wolf, so why don't you start by telling us a little bit about the Agribility Project and how your work in agriculture benefits us at the foundation.
Thanks, Casey. Well, I have a very unique role at the Arthritis Foundation. My position with Agribility is actually grant funded by the USDA and managed by Purdue University. And my main focus is the agricultural communities in Indiana. So I work with farmers and ranchers and gardeners that have different forms of arthritis, whether it's osteoarthritis in their knees. We have a lot of bad backs in agriculture and in farming. And gardening has started to come to the top as one of the most popular hobbies in Indiana right now, as well as a form of income for some of our farmers. So arthritis and gardening tend to go together quite a bit. And that's one way that I can pull in the Agribility program with the Arthritis Foundation to benefit both.
Oh, absolutely. So what is the agricultural industry like in Indiana, and how do gardeners fit in that bigger picture? I know you just touched on that, but do you mind expanding?
Sure. Well, the agricultural industry here in Indiana is different than what you might say find in the West. We don't necessarily have as many ranchers as we would in Colorado
Yeah.
or Wyoming. We have more row crop farmers, we have livestock farmers, but we also have a very large population of small farms and niche markets. So if you go out to many towns on Saturdays, you'll see farmers markets and gardens, and you'll see roadside stands, people growing their crops and growing their produce. So we have about 50% of those consumer-driven type of industries here in Indiana. And that gardening really fits really well in Indiana because we're in such a good temperate climate, especially in the spring and summer. We can grow anything from nursery products like apples and things in orchards. We even have wineries in Indiana. But then we also have some of the basic garden crops like tomatoes and peppers and things that we'll talk a little bit about today when it comes to how to plant and what to do with arthritis.
Very cool. I know I love going to the farmer's market on Saturdays and Wednesdays. So how does arthritis pain affect gardeners and farmers?
Well, arthritis pain affects gardeners and farmers the same way it does anyone else. It's going to be limited range of motion. It's going to be a lack of grip strength in their hands, lower back pain, knee pain. It's very limiting. It's going to affect them in the way that they might not feel that they can go out to do their gardening that day. Even though it might be a pleasurable activity for them, it's also going to be very painful and it's going to be very difficult. But at the same time, it can also be a very beneficial aspect for them too because it is therapeutic and it gets them moving. And anytime that they can move, it's going to make things a little bit better. So, for example, some of the things that gardeners think they have to give up are things like larger scale gardens because they can't get down on their knees to weed all of their plants.
Yeah.
Or they can't carry their crop up to the house or in baskets when they're finished. And those are some things that they think they have to give up. And I don't think that's the case.
Nor do I. So how and what are the different ways that gardeners can manage their pain?
Well, there are a couple of different things, and we'll talk about each of them a little bit more in detail on our next segment. But the first thing they can do is modify their entire garden and really look into how can they set up what they need to be doing. Is it too far from the house? Is it too far from their water source? Maybe they're growing the wrong kind of plants. Maybe they don't need to be doing something that's very labor intensive or something that's very heavy. Other things they can do is to really get their bodies in the right position. So for example, it's important that a gardener kind of defines what they need to do in their garden. Are they just a hobby gardener? Do they only like to garden for fun in the evenings or on the weekends? Or is it a form of income? Because if it's a form of income, like at farmers markets and roadside stands, they almost have to go out and do that gardening, even if they're in pain. So they don't necessarily have that play area there. So they can do a few things health-wise, like protecting their joints, whether that means to keep their body in the correct posture, whether it's with a back brace or a kneeling pad that they can use to put underneath them on the garden. Some other examples for those of you who can see the slides are things like wearing braces on their hands and wearing gloves. Using garden carts. Right now you can go to almost any garden store and find really neat garden carts that are on wheels. They can carry their tools with them as well. But you still have to be very careful about those. because they're not universal for every body type. Some people are too tall to use them, and some people just don't have the correct access in their gardens to be able to use those larger garden carts, and it ends up being more difficult than when it really should be.
Yeah.
Some other ways that they can get themselves ready, again, for those of you who can see the screen, are to do a simple set of gardening stretches. We have worked with a couple of our physical therapists here in Indiana that work with the Arthritis Foundation, and they came up with a simple set of stretches that we call Don't Let the Dirt Hurt. And it's 4 minutes of stretching before, 4 minutes during while they're in the middle taking a break, and 4 minutes after. And some of these can be done while they're seated. Some can be done while they're standing or just working in the garden, just simply to make sure that their joints are really in the position that they need to be in.
That's very interesting, and I can see that being an easy change for a lot of people who currently garden, just adding that little bit of time to the beginning and end of their gardening. So I know you mentioned some of the adaptive tools earlier, but we have some here at the table. Do you mind describing what a few of these are used for and what if they have special names? I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, and some of them don't have special names. Garden tools to some people are just garden tools. And you can make your own tools to help make things easier on the garden. For example, I have a length of pipe insulation that you can get at your local hardware store. Very often with gardeners, grip strength is very limiting. They can't grab a hold of the tool. They can't use their wrist for their full amount of range of motion. They need to use the larger joints in their body. So adding something like a simple bit of pipe insulation to increase their handle diameters is a great way to use something easy.
So something like this?
Absolutely. Something like that, just very cheap, easy pipe insulation that you can buy at your local hardware store. You can also add additional handles onto long handle gardening tools is a good way to do that. And we'll see some pictures as well in our next segment of some of these tools as we go along. So really, the main thing to really consider as far as getting themselves prepared to garden is making sure they're working with the right tools, making sure they're working with the right type of crop for what they need and what they're doing, and making sure that they're set up for what their role is. What is their outcome and their goal that they're trying to reach, but then also balancing that with how does their arthritis pain affect them and what can we do to continue.
Absolutely. Well, there's definitely more to learn about gardening with arthritis. As Amber mentioned, we have more tools to go through and different alternatives to help ease the pain. So we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk a little bit more about that and see a few more slides with Amber.
You know, when Margaret and I decided to sell the old estate here, we had only one choice in signage. Logan Street signs and banners. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore, but rather located on 10th Street on the south side of Noblesville. Well, we sold the old beauty, and we were able to buy this wonderful estate. And we had so much money left over, I was able to buy this beautiful 1968 Eldorado Cadillac for Margaret. Only 472,000 miles. Margaret loves it because it's got those big seats and that heavy-duty suspension to support her svelte frame. Next time you're looking for signs or banners, call old Jim at Logan Street Signs and Banners, 773-7200. Conveniently not located on Logan Street anymore.
Everyone knows it's easy to find first-run movies in the big theaters. But where can you go to watch your favorite classic movies on the big screen for the perfect night out? Why rent a flick when you can rent the entire theater? Call today to reserve our 32-seat theater for your next event or just stop by to see what's showing this weekend. The 14 by 7 foot screen and the high quality digital surround sound system offers all the amenities you would expect from the big theaters with a laid back atmosphere and comfortable seating of your own home. Wofford Theater at 1744 South 10th Street in Noblesville gives you the classic movies you want with a big theater experience.
Welcome back. I'm Casey Stein with the Arthritis Foundation here with Amber Wolf, another member of our of the Arthritis Foundation, who serves as our AgriBility project coordinator. Amber, we were just talking about the different type of assistive and adaptive tools that can be used to ease pain for those with arthritis. But we also were going to talk a little bit about other ways to ease the pain, such as raised beds or different gardening containers. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. One of the most important ways that gardeners can prepare themselves for an easier gardening experience with arthritis is to make sure that they can get around their garden appropriately. Garden mobility and planning is very important. It's very easy to get excited in the spring and go to Lowe's or go to the local garden store and buy all of the plants that look neat and take them home and start just putting them out in the garden bed. But really making sure that you plan out how wide your rows need to be so you can easily walk around through your plants, or figuring out how deep all of your plants need to be so they're going to be successful is very important. With garden mobility, it's also more of a case of where are you putting all of your plants? Are you planting in the only flat area you have in your yard, which is at the bottom of a hill, making it more difficult to walk to the top if you have arthritis pain? Are your water sources too far away and you're dragging hoses with you all the way down your driveway, which again makes it difficult if you have back pain or knee pain or even limitations with your grip strength. So making sure that you plan out your garden is very important. The last thing we want is someone who has severe arthritis pain tripping over their plants because the weeds are too thick or there's not enough room to move in between them. And one of those things that they have to consider is, are they going above and beyond what they're really capable of doing? It's very easy to plant too many items and then not be able to take care of them. A funny story there is that my grandfather used to grow a large garden in our community, a very rural town, and he would love to share all of his produce with people. So he planted 50 tomato plants one year. And he couldn't understand why. He was so tired and it was so much work to take care of them. And we convinced him that he had to cut back the next year. He just couldn't do that many plants. So he was very proud of himself the next year when he told us he cut back from 50 to 46. Which didn't really make a whole lot of sense to anyone else in the family. But to him, in his mind, it made the job a little bit easier. So one thing to always watch out for as gardeners with arthritis are planning is, what are they actually capable of taking care of? And then how are they going to get that done, whether it's in a container bed or a raised garden?
That's probably a hard thing to hear, that you have to cut back on something you enjoy so much. But knowing that if you do cut back, you'll feel better and enjoy it more is a nice payoff. So we were talking about gardening tools. So you've got your garden in the right spot. It's close enough to your water source. Now, how can you make the actual process of gardening easier?
Well, one way you can do that is to even bypass putting a garden out in a big part of your yard. A very popular trend right now is container gardening, planting things in small decorative pots on your front porch, or planting in cinder blocks that give you a perfect hole that's perfect for a root system. For those of you who can see the screen right now, you can see some really neat images of carrots being grown in a clay pot on a front porch. Pinterest is great for people who love to garden in unique ways. That's where I found some of these images of the gutters being used as hanging containers for some of these plants. Gutters and hanging containers work really well for things like your salad lettuces and your herbs, things that you'd use in your kitchen. So there's really neat ways that you can grow things in a small container. And that prevents you from having to use a rototiller out in the garden or finding a tractor to till up the ground. It also prevents you from having to get down on your knees and kneel or to bend over, because all of those plants are right there at your natural height, which makes it a lot easier for you as a gardener with arthritis to get your work done.
Very cool. And is that the same with raised beds then?
Fairly similar. Raised beds tend to give you a little bit more space. You're still planting out in a flat area where you might be able to do rows of a crop. So instead of just one single tomato plant in a container pot, you could still do 10 tomato plants or 10 bell pepper plants. But again, raising those beds up just simply makes it a little bit easier on a gardener who has arthritis pain, because they don't have to get down as far. You can raise them up something as easy as 12 inches off the ground in a small box. You could put them on straw beds, which uses old straw bales that some people have laying around out in their, especially in some of the rural areas, and it gives it a natural growing medium. So straw beds work really well because they have warmth in the inside for the soil. They have a good root system. They contain a good moisture level, and they're really easy because when you're done, you just simply have those straw beds hauled off. You didn't have to till your ground. You didn't have to prepare a garden bed. Another really easy way to do raised beds is something that people have been doing for years, and that's using trellises or using poles for things like beans and tomatoes. A lot of vegetables and plants and even some fruits and flowers will grow up a trellis. And if you think of people who've always had rose bushes and they have roses that climb their trellises, it's very easy because those plants naturally want to climb, which just brings them up again to your level. So as a person with arthritis, you don't have to do all that hard work down on the ground.
Wow, and those seem like pretty affordable alternatives as well. The straw and the trellises, those are great suggestions and great options. Now the tools that I tried to mention earlier, do you want to talk about any of them in specific that are helpful or unique?
Well, really, any type of tool can be helpful because all tools are made to do a job for someone in the garden. One of the key words that you need to remember with gardening tools is ergonomic, because especially with people who have severe arthritis in their hands or their elbows and their shoulders, you're putting a lot of stress and strain up on those joints. If you don't have the proper grip in your hands, it's very difficult to get your work done. So some of the things to consider is what we call the rule of thumb. So whenever you go to grab on to something, if your thumbnail overlaps your forefingernail too much, the grip is too small. If it doesn't touch at all, the grip is too large. So for example, you want that rule of thumb to perfectly overlap with your thumb and your forefinger. Another thing to consider is your wrist positioning. If you think about how you write, sometimes you'll have ergonomic mice for your computers or ergonomic pads because it's putting your wrist in that neutral position. Gardening tools do the same thing. So for example, some tools, let's say like this one, when you hold this, you're turning your wrist in an unnatural position because it's bending in a different direction. The natural position for the wrist is actually upright, which is why we have these great pistol grip gardening tools. So you can see the difference in how I have to put the stress and strain on my wrist by doing that. You can easily make a tool like this into a pistol grip tool with a piece of PVC pipe, or if it's a wooden handled, you could use a piece of dowel rod. Anytime you could make your grip more natural, it's going to be very, very effective for gardening tools. So that's kind of that whole ergonomic the area that we talk about. We really want to focus on the grip diameter and then also on the positioning of the wrist. But some of the other tools that we had shown up here on the on our table, specifically the long handled tools, anytime you can lengthen the tool you're working with, it almost serves the same purpose as the raised beds. It's preventing you from having to lean over and bend down. A lot of the agribility clients we work with also don't just have arthritis, but they have other disabilities. So long handled tools like this one up front could even be useful for someone in a wheelchair who is able to just simply garden from their chair and not have to get out of that. You can find telescoping tools at all kinds of hardware stores where they'll start out very short, but then they just extend in length. So you can work wherever you need to without having to either get off of your gardening cart or a bucket or something you're sitting on. You can also add additional handles to the really long handled tools. Anyone who has ever raked leaves or used a long shovel knows that you're stretching your arm out. And you can see in the picture on the slide here, the gentleman that has a long-handled wooden tool has just simply added an extra handle halfway down. And by doing that, you also turn your wrist back to a more natural position. Wow. And it lets you use the larger joints possible. So anytime you're working, you don't want to put all the pressure on those smaller joints. By adding an extra handle, you're using your entire back and to do all of that gardening work, not just your hands. So that's a good use of some of those long-handled tools. Some other assistive tools that we have out on the table, just some really, some neat things I like. These are kind of the novelty items that I like to show people when we garden. This is a great little tool here. It's called a shovel step. And anyone who has ever had to, especially as a kid, put their feet on a big shovel and jump up and down to get it to break into the soil, this step here slides down on the handle of that shovel and it gives you a platform. So it's not only ergonomic because it's letting you use more weight, but it's also non-slip, so you're not going to fall off of it. And it really lets you get that work done without having to, jump up and down on a shovel like some people have to do.
Yeah.
So that's a neat novelty item. And then we also have the handle grips that you can use.
Well, thank you very much, Amber. If people wanted more information on agribility, where can they go?
very simply, they can go to agribility.org or go to the Arthritis Foundation website.
Well, thank you very much. Our next episode will be specifically about juvenile arthritis. If you have more questions, please contact Kendall Horvatich.
Be sure to tell people verbally what your website is and your Facebook is for the radio.
Okay. Kendall Horvatich, her phone number is 317-879-0321, or you can visit our website, www.arthritis.org/INDIANA, or www.arthritis.org/Indiana. Thank you again to our sponsors, Logan Street Signs and Banners and the Wofford Theater. Have a great day.